So we're going to read all 16 of Robin Hobb's Elderling series this summer in the Summer of Hobbs. If I have any editing skills at all, I'll figure out how to do the Summer
Her name's
of
just
Hobbs.
Hobbs.
Is it? This is going
channel. We're the Book Mavens. I'm Rachel. This is Amanda. And we decided to take on this summer challenge of reading all of Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings series. So we are going to start off our BookTube channel with this kind of special edition, special project that we're doing. And we're starting with book 1 of the Farseer Trilogy, Assassin's Apprentice. And this is obviously book 1 to the Realm of the Elderlings series. So make sure you stay tuned with us as we work through the summer and explore all 16.
Yeah, so in the Farseer Trilogy, we start with the character Fitz. Fitz is the illegitimate child of one of the princes of the realm of the 6 duchies. And so it's basically about how Fitz tries to find his place. So he is discounted, and there's a lot of information in his backstory. Like, he causes a lot of ripples in the court when he shows up, which we will get more into in a minute. But Fitz is like trying to find his place in this world, and he's obviously going to become the assassin's apprentice. And it's kind of his early story, and it is written in a style where he's like looking back years later and talking about it. So it's a very much establishment book. It's establishing a lot of the characters, and it's establishing a lot of the systems. So that first magical system that's tied to the nobility is called the skill, and it's more revered. It's more highly favored. And then there's a second lower system called the wit, which allows you to connect with animals, whereas the skill allows you to connect with people more telepathically. And so the competition between those two, not just for Fitz, but in the way that society looks at it, is a key factor in the book. And this is the part where if you want to read it along with us, you should stop the video, you should go read it, and then you should come back, because we're about to spoil all kinds of stuff about this book. So, last chance. Last chance. Okay, now we're going to talk about the good stuff. So the main external conflict of this whole series, well, I assume it's the whole series. I mean, I just don't really see how they're going to resolve this quickly.
Well, they have not with the red ships. The
red ships and forging. So the red ships come and okay, I have to admit, I was intrigued because it's like turns the classic trope on its head. The red ships come and they kidnap people from these villages, and they demand ransom, but if you don't pay the ransom, then they will return the people to you, which of course makes no sense, because like that's the opposite of everything. But the people they actually return to you have been forged. Now, even in this book, and this is a projection I have for later, I don't really understand what the forging is, because they don't really tell you, but it basically sucks the humanity from them. Like, they become these very like aggressive, almost survivalists. Like, they're locked in survival mode, and so they have no memory of their loved ones. They have no real personality from who they were before. They're just like locked in this like aggressive trying to
they can remember and they can
survive.
Communicate things, but
it doesn't matter. Like, it talks about like children attacking their parents, and like being really like, it talked about that one woman like pushing your child away, like, ugh, I can't stand you. Like, you know, they basically lost all of the affection and love.
It just becomes about their base needs.
Right. They're like stuck in that very bottom level of the survival pyramid. And so if you don't pay the ransom, then they return them to you. But if you pay the ransom, then they just execute them all, which also is, they really don't give you a lot about the red ship in this one. Like, she really teases it out, because like it's escalating and it's getting worse and worse. Like, it talks about more towns falling, and like he has several encounters with like these forged bands of people. But like they really don't give you a lot about it. Like, it's really more focused on what's happening inside the keep, like inside the king and the king's circle about it, but not really a lot about what their motivation is or where it's coming from.
It's mainly political. I feel like this first book is very political. Yes, we have this threat happening. The attempt is being made to handle it, and Fitz absolutely has encounters with the Forged, and it is a threat, but so much more of the book centers around politics and about these dealings that Regal is doing behind his brother's back, and the fact that we have where Regal is being sent out to try and find Verity a bride, which is a whole other situation. The worst person ever. Yeah, Fitz is in this really weird position in the fact that you don't want to draw too much attention to him because that implies that he is important and that he could be a threat to this inherited kingdom system. So that I think they're really careful about that and making sure that he stays within a place that's comfortable for everyone. And that's kind of tough because he definitely has some really interesting innate abilities that would be very beneficial to the kingdom overall. It's just he's so like in the shadows, I think, maybe like in terms of
underrated,
right, making him the assassin, you know, that he is going to be. It's a pretty high ranking position. I mean, you're with the king, you get directives from the king himself. That's
true. You get immediate access to him whenever you want,
but it's totally in the shadows, so it's still
right.
You're never like this public figure, which is very interesting and actually a really safe place to stick him. Well, that's what I think is very interesting with the relationship between King Shrewd and Regal, with Regal being the favored son when he's really pretty worthless, when Verity is the one who's gone on and tried to fill Chivalry's footsteps in terms of making those relationships, and the fact that Verity's super skilled in the skill and that he is literally wasting away protecting this kingdom and that he's given such little credit, I think is super.
Can we talk about his bride?
Oh, Turducken.
Okay, we're not 100% sure how you pronounce it, as with any name in this book. If that's not how you were pronouncing it, we're so sorry. We're just doing our best over here.
The whole time I read her name, I just hear Turducken in my head. Turducken. That's what I hear. That's what I call her.
Kittricken.
Okay, I guess.
Let me talk about her.
Girl's gonna get things done.
I like her so much. She, like, the scene for me. Okay, so they get to the mountains. And Regal has told everyone that Fitz is the assassin. Like, he's told the royal family, which is immediate red flags because that's not how it's supposed to work. He's supposed to be, like, this super secret, like, person. And so you're already, like, red flags are going off. And so Fitz is, like, trying to figure it out. This is such a sweet moment for me from Verity, where he's like, talk well of me, Fitz. Like, he says, like, when you meet her, if you have an opportunity, talk well of me. I don't want her to think that he just wants her to think well of him, which I think is so sweet, because he can't go because he won't leave his people unprotected. Like, he's using basically every waking moment to try to keep the red ships away using the skill, and it's really taking a physical toll on him.
I mean, the skill, once again, allows you to get into people's minds. And so he's projecting all kinds of things to convince these ships not to, or the people on the ships.
To, like, turn around. Like, but it's taking all of his energy and focus. And so he can't travel it takes a couple weeks, they said, to get to the mountains for this ceremony, for them to be married. So Regal's going to, like, stand in his place for the ceremonial marriage, and then
meanwhile has been trashing Verity.
Right. He has been talking so bad about him. She's like, he makes, the princess is talking to Fitz. She's like, it makes him sound like he was like a really old man on his deathbed. And he's like, no, that's not
he's
what
in
he's
his
like.
early 30s.
Yeah. She's like, oh, that's not what y'all read to me. And he goes, yeah, I don't know what Regal's been telling you, but he's a liar, pants on fire.
Well, I mean, he's doing that on purpose. I mean, Regal's whole goal is to assassinate Verity and then be in line. We'll be the king in waiting, and we'll take Turducken as his bride. And
which I think is completely politically motivated. It has nothing to do with her, even though she seems like a real gem, because
she's pretty funny.
She loves her family, but like Regal told them, like, hey, we're bringing the assassin. He's going to try to kill your brother. And she's like, I ain't having none of that. And then she meets Fitz, and then she gets confused. And it is so, I don't know why I find it so hilarious and charming, because like she poisons Fitz, which he realizes too late, and he's trying to he's taking these herbs that the fool gave him.
Mhm.
We'll come back to the fool. The fool gave him to purge his system, and so he's really weak, and it's early morning. The brother comes running in, the king of the mountain people. He comes running in. He's like, "Are you alive?
Mhm.
She just told me she poisoned you. I'm so sorry." And Fitz is like,
risk.
Yeah. He's like, "Too late. I'm already fine." And the brother's like, "I'm sorry." And then he's like, "But then you confused her. She you were nice." And she thought, "Oh no, he's not here to kill my brother." And then you dodged her question. And she's like, "Oh well, crap, he's here to kill my brother." And then you were nice again. So she just poisoned you just to be sure. Which,
Then she, had to sit and
then she felt bad
think
about
on
it after hours and told her brother. And she's there the whole time in the background, while the brother's telling him this stuff. And she's just like, "Well,
yeah, did it.
Better safe than sorry," was my theory. And I'm just over here poor Fitz. It's
Poor
just
Fitz.
getting
Well, because
poisoned.
he's lied to him, and he's told that Risk has been injured, and he was hit by an arrow, but he had recovered. But he's
on the edge of death.
On the edge of death, and so let's just ease him on over.
Right,
and
that he was really against the alliance, which
Yes.
he's not. He actually ends up being kind of kindred spirits to Chivalry, who is very diplomatic, very much about
close relationship.
Yeah, close relationships between these kingdoms, mutually beneficial trade, that kind of stuff.
He talks to Fitz, and Fitz is given a completely different position to them because apparently his bastard.
Yeah, they don't really care
Status
about
doesn't
marital
matter to
status
them.
for children. Children are children.
But he talks to him in a very upfront way, and talks about the timber, and that he's absolutely committed to taking down these very large ancient oaks, I think, right? Because Verity needs them to create ships to be able to create a, I guess, naval presence against the red ships.
Which I think is where we're going in the next series.
Yes.
Looking ahead, one of the series is called the live ship something.
Live Ship Trilogy.
And so we're like,
hint.
Hey.
All right.
I think we got it.
Perhaps.
But yeah, I dig her in a lot of ways because she's just real direct.
She puts it out there for you.
She does. And she's very there's a lot of, the antiquated, because this is obviously based on medieval Europe, social structures. And there's very much oh, women are just here to look beautiful and I'm just no, I ain't got no time for that. She's taking things in her own hands. She's poisoning people. She's forgiving people, getting Fitz pardoned. And then, she's taking an active role in her life. She's here for this. And I'm I like you, even though you really jumped the gun on the poisoning of people.
Yeah, but the mountain people, their society is completely different.
That's true.
And so everybody has a purpose. Everyone is included. I love this idea that anything that's needed by anyone is shared.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they come up for the wedding, right? So where we have Regal, who's going to stand in for Verity, kind of a marriage by proxy situation going on, that they bring all of these things, obviously as gifts to her people, and that they literally just march them up through their main. How they describe the whole setup is just super interesting. These buildings that aren't really meant to be permanent, but yet are permanent, that are it's just really interesting in the how much color they use. Anyway, but are marched in there, and then they decide, and it doesn't matter who you are in terms of ranking, that if it's needed, then it goes to them. And I just found that just to be a super interesting system. I was there for that.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Well, and then of course Regal plays his cards and tries to kill Fitz and almost succeeds. And then this is where you realize that
Have your moment.
I do have my moment, because you realize, okay, there's a point when they get there and he's walking around, he sees this old dog, and the prince is like, "Oh, that's my best dog ever. He's just so great. He was a gift from Burke." And he's like, "Wait a minute, what do you mean?" And he looks, and it's Nosy, the puppy that he thought that Burke had killed at the very beginning. And then he's like, that's when he has this whole moment with Burke, and Burke's like, "Why? I must have thought I was a monster," but he's still like, whatever. So Nosy's the one who saves the day. Yay for the dogs. The dogs are the heroes here over and over again, honestly, which I also appreciate.
Well, and Smithy.
Oh, Smithy, the puppy. Okay. Anyway, bless his heart, Fitz. Every time he gets attached to something, it just gets snatched from him.
Away.
I mean,
he still has City, his horse.
That's true. He does have City the horse,
But he never bonded with City. Like that wasn't
that's
a
true.
thing.
That's what I'm saying.
He
Every
never had
time,
the bond.
but maybe that's the foreshadowing on the wit is that, well, because everything he's ever like, made a bond through the wit with both of those dogs.
Well, foreshadowing for the second book on the cover, there's a wolf.
Oh, that's
in
true.
the background. So I don't know, like, looking at the back cover, that it looks like perhaps he will bond with more intellectually complex animals. So I'm there for that. I think that would be really cool. I'm getting a little White Fang vibe. I'm there for that. Old Jack London thrown in.
Little Jack London.
Yeah, I got it. I would rather have the wit than the skill, but that's just me. If I had my,
I honestly would rather have neither. If we're gonna be honest, I just want to be like, because there are so many other great characters we haven't talked about. We have to talk about Molly. Molly Nosebleed, which is not really her name, which she doesn't realize until they're teenagers that was just the nickname that people
Molly
give her. Nosegay, I think it is.
Yeah.
So Molly has an abusive father, and her mother's passed away, and he doesn't like. That's one of his first experiences is like Molly. There's this scene where Molly's father finds them and they're like playing by the water and like comes up and like he's gonna hit her, like he's gonna physically abuse her in front of him. And like before Fitz really understands what's happening, he basically uses his power to repel the dad, and
Which would have been a skill. So
right, it would have been a skill. So it's like it's kind of foreshadowing that he maybe has both, but he doesn't really understand what it is. He's actually really surprised and shocked that he did it. And then there's like this whole fear, like, oh no, did I kill him? And he didn't. But like, it is one of the first foreshadowing moments that there's something different about Fitz. And then, of course, as people do, they grow up, and then he sees her years later, and he's like, "Woo, Molly, all right, okay."
Well, it's pretty steady. I mean, he has this crush. Hobb kind of bounces around in terms of what the actual age difference is. Like sometimes it seems like it's only like a year or 2 years, and then sometimes it's 3 years. So I'm not really sure. I think Fitz doesn't actually know how old he is.
Right.
He's guessing. He is guessing. So they don't really make that clear. We just know that she is slightly older than he is, and so she's interpreting his attention as something else because she thinks that he is a kind of an errand boy for Buckkeep and is learning the scribe
he's
trade
to write.
Yes, because he can read, and that's something she can't do. And
and it leads to this really sweet scene where
that is the best scene.
It's so sweet. She has all these letters and like papers that her mother wrote. No, I know that's not the one you love. Okay, you can tell your favorite Molly scene.
You tell your Molly scene.
Okay, I'll tell mine and then you tell yours. So I love the scene where she realizes that he can read because like they've run into each other again. She's taken over the candle making business from her father because he's an alcoholic and basically can't survive on his own. And so she basically runs this business, and that's what her mother did. And so she has all these papers, but she can't read. And then she realizes that Fitz can read the list. Like he has a shopping list that he was given. And she's like, you know what those words are? And it's just this really sweet, like she's kind of subtly asking him, do you know how to read? Which I just find really cute. Anyway, so then she goes and gets the papers, and he reads her the papers. And like there's some that are like recipes for candle scents, and then there's one that's like a entry on the day of her birth, and she talks about the candles that she burned when her daughter was born and like why she called her. And then that is when she finds out her real name, Molly Nosegay. And it's like why her mom named her that, and you're like, oh, it's just the sweetest little moment. And she's trying so hard to like memorize everything he says because she can't read. Oh, it just breaks my heart. It gets me.
It does.
Okay, tell me about your favorite scene, because you texted me. You're like, oh,
well, this scene is what really I think drew me into the books, because I do really appreciate character development and character relationships. I think the relationships between characters is what really will draw me into a book. That's just my personal thing about books. And so they're out and walking around. He often goes with her while she runs her errands and things like that. And he's always sent by Shade or somebody else to collect things from the little village. And so they're walking together, and they're talking about Verity's kind of search for a bride, and that Regal has been given this job to find a bride. And And they're talking about these things coming from a completely different angle, where Molly is thinking, well, this is going to be a noble woman, so looking for women who are delicate and soft and who are beautiful. And this just confounds Fitz, because Fitz is like, that's not who Verity is. This is why Regal's going to suck at doing this job.
Yeah,
and
he's the worst choice to pick a bride for his brother.
Right. And that Verity is somebody who wants a woman to be a partner with him and to look at his maps with him, because Verity does all of these really very detailed maps. He's very familiar with this kingdom, and that those are the things he values, and the idea of self-sacrifice, and that is what defines Verity. And a pretty woman isn't going to do that. And Molly kind of scoffs at him about it, well, who doesn't want a beautiful woman? And Fitz really outlines these ideas of what he finds to be beautiful. And he talks about these women in his life in terms of, what they're doing and how they create beauty. And that's what's important, and that's what's beautiful. And that was such a moment for me, because this is such a kind of a wealth of wisdom coming out of it. A kid who's really only maybe like 14 during that scene, and was so appealing. So I completely understand in terms of, tying these two characters together, I guess shipping Fitz and Molly, why she would just be like all about Fitz. And Fitz is somebody who according to her has this position where he could be a life partner. So she, I think, absolutely thinks that Fitz is courting her, and Fitz just thinks he has this crush on this older girl.
He totally misses the moment, though,
He
too.
really
I feel
does.
Like it's classic Fitz. Because she's like,
yeah.
well, if you don't think that any of those women have real beauty, who do you think
yes.
does? And like, obviously, he's supposed to say, you do, Molly. And he doesn't. He's just like,
well, she makes a comment where she doesn't know how to read, and that this makes her less. And Fitz is like, what are you talking about? You're running this business. You make the best candles in town. You have, incredible things to offer someone who cares about reading, and you could always learn.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's really eye-opening for Molly in terms of how he sees her, and she really appreciates that. So that whole scene is just,
it is. It's like awkward. It's a little awkward.
It is so sweet. And just a missed opportunity. And when he kind of feels like maybe he can court her, and then there's this misunderstanding, I guess, with this other fella, a sailor named Jade.
Always feeling insecure.
He is. He was insecure. He missed his moment, and then he never really confronts Molly, and then she is gone somewhere else. There could have been something tragic happening.
Yeah, you don't really know what happens to Molly at the end of the book. Like, he's still definitely, he thinks about her all the time. Like, she's her.
Well, she leaves for another town.
She leaves for another town, but you don't really know what town. Like, it's very in passing. But he is very, I think the other reason why he kind of clings to Molly is because Molly has no idea who he is. No. She doesn't know he's the assassin. She doesn't know that he's the illegitimate child of chivalry. Like, she really just thinks he's like a boy from the keep. Like, that she does. And so for him, I think she's uncomplicated by her lack of knowledge of his backstory. And so when she's friends with him, it is legitimately for himself. And that is a very unique experience for him, because all of his other relationships are defined in one way or another by how much they know about him. Like, Jade and the king are the only ones who really know about that he's training to be the assassin. Even Burrick doesn't know at first.
He does not. I
think he knows eventually. Like, surely he knows.
But he never questions him. It's like,
right, they never
actually really want to know, because that would be totally a Burrick thing to do. No, I don't need to know. Yeah. Better off not knowing, I think, is Burrick's.
Yeah, but I kind of identify with that kind of problem solving. We're just like,
we're just gonna put a blanket over
that.
Like,
not think about that right now.
Alone.
I mean, sure. I mean, that's the adult way to handle your problems. You
I do. I love Patience. I think Patience is one of the most interesting characters in the series. Patience was Chivalry's wife. And there's this whole backstory behind this, in that Patience is barren. She could not have his children. This was a love match. He was not encouraged to pursue Patience. She's kind of an oddball. Chivalry just fell in love with her, and I think because she was so different, and she wasn't
like
after everyone else. She wasn't
thing.
After him.
She's like,
yeah, always want the unattainable. So He got her, so I guess she wasn't truly unattainable. But the whole relationship there is interesting. Yeah, I forget the name of it.
Yeah, he basically gets retired to the country.
Yes. And so they're living there, and then he ends up dying, and Patience comes to Buckkeep. And this whole thing, of course, you've already explained about Burrich in terms of talking to Patience, where Patience blames Burrich for the fact that Chivalry slept with a village woman, and
which I really want more about this, because there's like hintings that might be where the wit comes from.
Yeah.
But more on that later. Patience, she's about, how old is he when she shows up? Maybe 11 or 12?
Yeah.
He's pretty established at the keep at this point.
But it's after, Chivalry was alive for quite some time after he was taken to Buckkeep.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So after Chivalry dies, so she comes to Buckkeep and kind of establishes herself there. She's not any kind of queen. She is not running any kind of court. She stays up in her own chambers, and she decides to take an interest in Fitz, which is super...
She's complicated.
Yeah,
she has complicated feelings about him, as you can imagine.
Well, there was that moment, though, it just broke my heart as a mother, that she looks at him and they're having this kind of confrontational moment, and she just kind of yells at him, that you should have been mine. And I think that's, you really see this inner pain and turmoil she has for the love she had of Chivalry, and that he was able to get something that she couldn't give him. Yeah. And that obviously would have created a lot of complicated emotions. So she's trying to do the best she can for this boy, and has no idea how to go about it, and has no idea how emotionally invested she should be or shouldn't be. And she's got this lovely kind of lady in waiting, Lacey, her maidservant, and Lacey is just kind of like the voice of reason through all of this. She's very, very patient with Patience. Patience is like the opposite of what her name really represents. She's very impatient.
I imagine that Chivalry was very similar to Lacey in that kind of calmed, observational,
just kind of enjoyed it for what it is.
Right. Just kind of along for the ride, but also like points out, because there are several times where Lacey, like she talks to Fitz. She's like, listen, he goes, I really like the puppy she gave me. And she's like, well, you should tell her that. Yeah. Because you giving her nothing. And then also to Lady Patience is like, okay, he's like 10. Let's bring our expectations on down. Let's reel that in, honey. Come on. So I really hope there's more Lacey, because I really like her.
She's pretty funny. But their whole relationship. She tries to teach Fitz all of these things, and she has no patience in which to do it. And it's like Fitz, I think, is interesting because you just see how patient he is with Patience.
She basically just spends a lot of the initial. She just fusses at him.
She does.
A lot of the initial. And he's just like, she's like, well, why don't you know how to play instruments, and why don't you know how to like say all these poems? And he's just like, he goes, he's in his mind, he's like, lady, I'm not actually like, I'm on the fringe here. I'm not really up in this court. Like,
and she gets angry. There was some, like in terms of him, because he was living in the stable. It wasn't until Patience, right?
That's true.
Yeah. She's like, no, sweetheart, you need to be living in the castle. So he's giving a lot more.
But that's another really sweet scene with Burrich, because she's like, because he's like, but I don't want to sleep in there. Like, why, sweet. He's like, listen, just because you have a room there doesn't mean you have to sleep there every night. And I was like, oh, Burrich.
Well,
So the only other character we have not talked about that we really need to is the Fool. So the King's Fool, he's interesting because he's initially introduced, as you would imagine, as the court jester character, right? Like, he talks nonsense and he doesn't, but then he just progressively gets more and more interesting, because it becomes a big deal later, because somebody asks him and he's like, oh, the Fool talks to you? And he's like, and Fitz is like, yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I don't understand what he says because he talks in riddles, but like, yeah. Because apparently
he has some kind of foresight abilities. He does warn Fitz a lot when Fitz is in danger.
And I wonder sometimes I think the Fool knows what he's warning him about, and sometimes the Fool does not even he knows it's a message, but he doesn't seem to really understand what it is either, which makes, like you suggested, I think there's some other kind of magic or power there that he doesn't understand. There's also a lot of speculation about where he comes from.
He doesn't look like anybody. Like, he's colorless.
Right.
Like, his eyes.
They describe him as colorless. Like, even his eyes as being colorless and his hair being colorless, which is a very interesting description.
I wonder if he's an elder.
Oh.
That's kind of where I'm thinking, like, ageless, meaning that he's immortal. Is he some kind of
But why is
other
he...
being? They have not talked, by the way, anything about the elders. This is just my guess in terms of
they only hinted the elders. They talk
Elderlings.
about like the elderlings are, if you're really, really good at the skill, like I hate to say skilled at the skill, but if you're really, really good at it, you might can speak to an elderling. But that it's like this really, like it's almost too much for mortals to handle, and it drives you crazy.
He's
But
been
so that's really all you get in this
exiled.
book.
Yes. So our rating system is based around food, okay? Because
Mhm.
we all eat, and we really like to eat, so we want
we
to
do.
relate it to things that are really understandable, kind of universally understandable.
Right. And so it is a little less traditional than the like star system, but that's just
I
kind of
just
how our
like
brain...
the star system.
Yeah, because I don't think it gives you enough detail. So
Mm-mm.
for me, okay, this is definitely an appetizer kind of book, okay? And I think we agree on the appetizer nature.
It is an appetizer.
This is chips and salsa for me, right? It's a little slow to start, and it does really pick up at the end, which is, salsa. Depends on who's making it, Spicy right off the bat, or does it build? But like, it's definitely, I'm satisfied that I did it, but this was not the story. Like, this book spends a lot of time priming you for things that are coming. And if you were just reading this as a standalone book, it would be very dissatisfying. Like, you'd be like, okay, I spent a lot of my time on that.
Yeah, you'd have to see how it was going to develop. I mean, I'm with Amanda here. It is definitely a chips and salsa book. I think that makes sense. But I would say with a small side of queso, because I do think, especially at the end, there's some meat to it. There's some heaviness to it. It's not quite as light as just chips and salsa. That they're, in terms of just building these characters, there's some heaviness to it. There's some storylines, I think, that definitely are starting to develop that are complex, and you want more. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. It absolutely is not a standalone book. You would have to do at least the trilogy.
Yeah, for sure. Because, I think you'd be wanting more, like an appetizer leaves you. So if you've read the book before, tell us in the comments. Do you agree? Do you not agree? You can disagree with us. We're fine with it. But like, tell us what you think.
Characters.
Yeah, favorite character. Did we miss a character that you really loved? Tell us in the comments. Let us know what you think. We are excited to move into the next book.
Yes, very much
Which is The Royal Assassin. Which I find little, like Rachel mentioned earlier, a little prequel. Sorry, it's in my bag. I was going to show it to you. But like, because the covers, he ages on the covers a little bit, which I thought is kind of cool. So like, go ahead and get you a good look at that. That's what we're reading right now.
Yeah, and at the end of the book, he's 15.
Yep. So we're
roughly
moving,
15.
We're moving on up in age.
Yeah, the second one will definitely be, I think, him as a young adult, I would assume, kind of spacing out about 10 years. I mean, it starts off about 6 to 15. So, yeah.
All right, so project. What do you think is going to happen in the next book?
Projection. Well, I think that we'll see more of Molly. I'm hoping we'll see more of Patience, because I love her. I do. I really like a good quirky character. And obviously the Fool, we want to see more development with that. But I'm really interested to see what they're going to do in terms of the red ships, the building of these new ships. If there's some foreshadowing in terms of the next trilogy, which is the live ship trilogy within the realm of the Elderlings series, that these ancient oaks that they've taken from the mountains, are they going to be special in some way? So, looking at the titles of the books and kind of knowing some kind of generalized information, that I would like to see if there's a connection there, if that's what we're getting. So
I agree.
I'm really looking forward to it.
I want to know more about the red ships. That's really the number one for me. I really want to know more about the red ships, and I really want the backstory on the Fool. Like,
yeah,
I really want the backstory on the Fool.
I don't know if we'll get it though. I don't know if we'll get it the second book. Oh, and I'm really looking forward to seeing if he's going to bond with a more complex animal. If we're going to get, the White Fang influence, the wolf.
Well,
I'm ready for that.
Follow us next week.
I want to see.
Yes. Read along with us.
Week.
If we missed a favorite character, if we missed a plot point, drop it in the comments. If you agree with our ratings or you don't, drop it in the comments. We're looking forward to talking to you. Bye.
Bye.